Hey everybody, we're back with another episode of Pixels and Protocols with the props team. I've got Bob Ulry here with me today. Good to
Hey,
see you.
Kevin. You too?
And Kevin Nuest here, and we are two of the four partner co-founders of Props, emerging tech product studio. And we love to jump on streams like this and conversations and talk through what we're building. Today, we brought to the table a very interesting topic around something we've been working on called the Diamond Smart Contract and the Diamond SDK. Is really the technical pieces behind a new paradigm of how to create and manage smart contracts as a starting point. Uh, won't go too far into it right now. Maybe we do talk about it a little bit, Bob, if we want to. But what we think we can do with that beyond smart contracts, beyond Web3 and blockchain. A lot of really cool opportunities and possibilities of how it evolves software development and AI development and sharing in general. And today we're going to talk a little bit about creating some UX UIs interfaces around interacting with the initial technical implementations that we have and go from there.
Cool. Would it help if I gave a little preamble on contracts, diamonds, kind of why and where we're going here?
For sure. For those of you who have not caught the last conversation we had about diamonds, Bob, if you could give us the what, why, it would be super awesome.
Yeah, sure. So, for those kind of starting fresh, we operate predominantly across and overlay between blockchain and AI. We'll really think of us as a full stack product studio, so technology indifferent. But we seem to be landing on these two pretty much for every solution these days. AI is pretty self explanatory, at least outside the scope of this conversation. Blockchain is an interesting topic to unpack because somehow the technology has become politicized, and you've got this bifurcation of citizenry. Some saying this is the future, we're on that side of the fence, and then others who have this like visceral reaction to it as being something nasty, like just a technology. So if you're on the other side of the fence, I would just ask you to suspend your disbelief as part of this conversation. We'll try to our best to unpack why we think blockchain specifically, and then what we're building on top of it is actually very meaningful. Blockchain, you can think of, and let's go deeper, click deeper. The Ethereum virtual machine, is essentially a decentralized operating system or decentralized compute. Nodes, so folks can run nodes. Nodes work together to form consensus and execute code. Ultimately, much of the output of that code might be written or read from the blockchain. The blockchain is incredibly resistant, always on, and essentially, in theory, lasts forever so long as there's not like a catastrophic asteroid that might hit Earth. You can think of a smart contract as a tiny application built in Solidity or Viper, some other compiled languages. They're Turing complete, and so you can do a lot of the same things you might do on a server or on your desktop, right? Run applications, run programs, and those programs are known as smart contracts. So when you hear us reference smart contracts, think of a mini application that runs everywhere, can't be taken offline, it's never down, and always works perfectly as designed, with incredible degree of resiliency. In terms of value prop, one thing I want to call out, not just because it's top of mind, is
Yeah.
the notion of deploying applications on chain. You get all that benefit in terms of resiliency for sure. We think one of the probably the biggest value prop is this notion of reducing your capex and opex to zero for deploying software, in the sense that in traditional software models, the developer, i.e., the organization that's building it, is paying for that infrastructure all the time, right? Even with auto scaling up and down, we're always going to have expenditures to keep servers on, whether we have one user or a million. And in this new world, the model flips, it can flip to a requester pays model. So think of this software always being available, but no hosting expenditure attached to it. And when a user uses your thing on chain, they pay the gas, what's called a gas fee, basically a reward for these nodes to do the thing you're asking them to do. And so that's really interesting, and part of the reason why we sort of perked up here and have been investing heavily over the last year or so into this model, this notion that it's sort of a better mousetrap when it comes to deploying new solutions in the market, because much easier costing calculus to deploy something that's always available, always on, always perfect, and the person who's using it is going to pay to use it. So really interesting there. The progression of Go ahead.
Scales with the usage then as well, right? So you don't have to predict and over provision to see where something's going to go, or worry about being under provisioned as you go as well. So that's, yeah, very much builder friendly, right? Creator founder builder friendly. Like, how much has the evolution of not having to rack your servers to get started building a startup, right, to what we went to in the cloud and AWS services that brought down the barrier to then create just massive innovation in startups and creation in the design space that could then be explored when you didn't have to clear a hurdle of $1 million of cost just to get your servers up to see if anybody likes your thing, right? So now, if I hear you right, Bob, you're talking about, as a creator builder, well, what if that cost went from the millions to it went to tens of thousands, to then now you're on demand in AWS to pay hundreds of dollars and replicate in other servers and such. So what if that was squashed to zero, and the idea and validation was being paid for by people, consumers that valued what that product was?
Yeah, true utilization based with 100% margin protection all the time. I think you, as a let's say a SaaS provider, your typical monetization strategy is going to be around a subscription, right? So what do you charge? It's usually tiered, so plan A, plan B, plan C, but that's a really wide window of usage within those plans. I could have a plan A and use the service one time. I'm paying the same amount as somebody who has a plan A and maxed out their limits on that plan. How do you protect margin as an operator when theoretically everybody could be on the top threshold of usage within your plans? You, on the same side, around like customer advocacy and retention, you have people potentially overpaying for the value that your platform's providing because they're not using it as heavily as their plan warrants the cost attached to it.
And
So
that's
this,
been a feature. That's been a feature, not a bug, of SaaS software in the last 10 years, right? Over the last decade. And now it is a bug in the fact that it opens up your margin is my opportunity to so many more builders, that if your efficient frontier of a large base of your users isn't matching with their plan, right, and they need about a quarter of what you're actually delivering under that plan, they're going to go find a place to go pay a quarter of the cost or less, right, depending on these new startups that come from the bottom up with a completely different capex opex, building their business and right sizing the payment to value for the customer, right? This is the big existential threat stuff for SaaS today.
yeah, and how does a product manager come up with a price for a subscription? Well, they work backwards in a spreadsheet, try to get down to the unit request cost, and tie their margin on top of it. And really, what we're basically saying here is, what if that unit cost was zero, right? And so any margin you attach to using what we would reference as a protocol on chain is entirely protected and is 100% margin on top of a $0 cost to actually execute that request. So that's really interesting. The other side, I think, in terms of value is quality of life for developers, in the sense of, this is still, we're getting into approximately year 6, 7 around programmable value, i.e., smart contracts. And so we're still in a pretty nascent space, and ideology and tooling has been building up along the way. And so has or let's say how a smart contract is created has evolved too. And there's really kind of three flavors, right? You've got the traditional kind of flat contract. You're going to deploy this contract to the chain. It's what we might call immutable, unchanging. You're basically deploying the code, and you'll never change it again. You can't. But it'll still last forever. There's some constraints here. One is there's a 24 kilobyte limit on your smart contract. And so that limits the amount of logic you might have in that contract. You can't build massive platforms in a single contract, in this flavor anyways, because your logic is going to balloon way past 24 kilobytes. So you see smart contracts acting in this way a lot like very tiny microservices that do something, right?
And,
Yeah, go ahead.
and this is what I think a lot of people think of when they think of smart contracts and blockchain are these immutable, unchanging smart contracts, applications, micro functions that that have been deployed, they've been written, have been deployed, they will forever be exactly like that. And that's true in this model, right? That's true. That's one use case for blockchain. But we've, as being elbow deep in this for 3 going on year 4, found very quickly and time again that the need to continue to change and iterate parallels traditional software development, right? And how can you predict something you do 3 years ago is future proof for the next 5 and 10 years when we can all see the rate of change, right? We didn't have ChatGPT in the form that we know it 18 months ago, right? How can we possibly predict as developers and builders what's going to happen in 5 and 10 years, like accurately enough to develop for that, pixel perfect, protocol perfect, right?
Yeah, and that's really a function of as the ecosystem grows, you may want to integrate with more things. As an example,
Yeah.
it's not just writing and reading on chain around things like NFT ownership, right? That's a really common use case, but there's so much more. This notion of other networks popping up that sort of live on top of the EVM but do something different, like Render Network as an example.
Mm.
Got lots of people with gaming rigs at their home, offices with unused GPUs, compute, whatever, and Render Network allows you to utilize that idle power. So it's not just read and write. It could be something like I want to generate a video or a piece of imagery or whatever using like a comfy or generative algorithm. And so most of those things, 99.99999% of everything has not been built yet. And that will always be a fair statement. There will always be new things to integrate with, new unlocks. And so if you're deploying a microservice, let's call them that for a second, but contracts immutably, that's it, right? No change allowed. What we found ourselves doing in order to get past the logic limitations of 24 kilobytes is then deploying multiple contracts and through logic linking them together. So this contract over here is like storage, is going to store all the data, but the primary contract over here is where the logic runs. So they're going to work together. There's a whole bunch of pitfalls with that, especially in a mutable construct. You can't update either of those things. And then you really have a firewall between the two. Like the storage in contract B is not on contract A. They must interface with each other. And so you've got sort of a spaghetti bowl on chain. It does work, right? But in general, it's kind of one and done. Here's our version. It is what it is. It's going to be wet cement and it's going to dry and that's it. Then from an evolution perspective, we started looking at, and the industry started using what's called a proxy, really heavily. So think of this kind of like your cell phone, right? You have a phone number, Kevin, and when I call that, it rings your cell phone, right? You could go get a new cell phone, but keep your number. And when I call that
Yep.
number, it's going to ring the new cell phone. And that's kind of what a proxy is, right? Proxy is like a slimmed down contract that acts as the phone number, and it goes and it pulls the right cell phone, the right contract, and it executes it. And what that unlocks for us is the ability to upgrade contracts. So in the old model, maybe we have multiple contracts working together. Well, now we can update one or all of them. And so you could sort of continue to expand this like network of contracts working together. Backwards compatibility gets really tough because you can't necessarily rip everything out, especially things like imports. You know, what kind of contract is this? What's the standard? You want to be able to rip that out and change it necessarily. And then to skip fast forward ahead, we think the ultimate pattern for on-chain software is in the form of a diamond. And so think of a diamond being very similar to that proxy model. You have one kind of master contract that is the primary phone number, and we can deploy other contracts around it, what we call facets, and these facets are like the logic contracts. You know, think of features. Maybe we encapsulate something like a subscription model as a contract, right? That's a facet. And from my diamond, I can simply install that facet into the diamond. I can replace that facet with a different version. I could remove it entirely from my diamond. And in that way, my diamond can be as big as it needs to be without having to do this rigmarole of like connecting lots of different contracts together and reasoning through the implications of that. I can think of it much more like traditional software with, essentially pull requests to install or change something on that diamond. So that's exciting, and I think it
Yeah.
opens up a new opportunity beyond the primitive use cases the industry have seen over the last few years, which predominantly land in digital asset ownership, i.e., NFTs, and probably DeFi would be the two I'd point at. We know, and I love your opinion on this, but what we've seen in the early stages of the age of AI, the rise of the solopreneur, right? The
Hmm.
ability for a single individual to build something meaningful and take it to market incredibly rapidly. And so our underlying premise here is, what if we could abstract the back end away from these solopreneurs and offer them a service where they can essentially assemble a back end via Legos, right? Facets, deploy a diamond for one very small flat fee, and then never have to pay for the infrastructure to run it because their end user would be paying to use it. We think there's something there, and we think in the future, I think it eats the world of centralized compute entirely. Like, my perspective is that this is the cloud we've all been talking about, but pointing at the other thing as being cloud, right? The other thing feels more like flat smart contracts to me, right? Lots of instances and nodes configured individually, right? Networked together.
Hmm.
Whereas this truly is a cloud of, call it a mesh network where everything on chain is instantly integratable with each other with no additional work, right? No point to point solutions between my org and yours. Our contracts can just work together instantly out of the box. So it is a better mousetrap. I do believe it'll eat centralized compute and what we know as infrastructure, and balloon the amount of compute we have on the planet because we all have servers in our pockets and
Yep.
many throughout our house that you wouldn't consider being a server, but your smart fridge, your stove, your laundry equipment, in theory, all of those will be connected to the network, doing small units of compute in order to gain some rewards as being part of that network.
You said something that lots of things that I find interesting in all that. It's something that I haven't picked up on in the past in our conversations, and I don't know. I'd like to grab this term and see where it goes and if it sticks. Instantly integrated over what we've been talking about in blockchain native, we call that interoperable. We talk about tokenized assets and information, be it digital or physical, and you can move it around and you can use it wherever you want. It brings its information with it. You can interact in lots of places. Interoperable on the blockchain is what that term has been. I would argue in my conversations, unless someone is truly like a builder in the blockchain space, or pretty heavily a user exploring the edges of blockchain, DeFi, games, right? It doesn't actually land with them. What is interoperable? Well, it's instantly integrated, right? You don't have to go. You don't have to. How many pieces of software do we use where we look at it and we say, oh, I hope to have an integration with platform X, Y, or Z because I need to get information to or from there, right? To do something either in the platform that I'm in, the app that I'm in, or I need to send it over there to do something else. So I hope to have an integration between the two to move the data. And what we're actually talking about here is this is an instant integration. These are one and the same. They are working together, right? You don't have to interface across disparate pieces of data and possibly very often keep redundant copies of the same information as well.
Yeah, you think of the old model like airplanes, right? You have to go from airport to airport. So I have to fly from Atlanta to LA and then connect to someplace else. Like I have to go through those nodes and those hubs. So you think of trad internet being a hub and spoke model where the airports are the big hubs, the Facebooks, the Googles, the Salesforce, the whatever, right? Huge, massive hubs with lots of regional airports off of them. But they had to create partnerships with every one of those regional airports to allow for those planes to fly between them. And you as a passenger have to get on the right plane at the right time, go there back and forth. Okay, I'll kill that analogy. The decentralized version of this, the real cloud looks more like roads. I can get my car and I can access any road on the planet. Well, other than maybe going over the ocean, but let's use North America. I can go on any road in North America from where I currently am right now. Right? All roads are integrated. They automatically connect to each other. Right? So that's an interesting paradigm. Just by paving a road off the network, you are instantly integrated with all other roads on the network. I think that's a good way to reason about it.
Yeah. So let's talk about revisit the solopreneur, the creator, founder, builder, the small teams that we've been working with bottom-up brands as part of what we have been doing over the last 3 years and have seen firsthand. And then we're seeing it accelerate as well. And a couple other things I wanted to add on to what powers this, right? So if we talk about you mentioned I'm going to put the deploy phase, the deploy stage of building an application, an offering, a business. Let's put a pin in the build phase of that app and come back to it. I'm going to categorize two other buckets that I think are important to mention here that are interesting to me of what this diamond structure unlocks and why it's important in a much broader sense is AI. So let's come back to AI and then value sharing. So starting with value sharing, using on-chain has been an unlock for value sharing, like hands down, for sure, better mousetrap. We have implemented it. We have done it dozens and dozens of times now with different partners in a creator builder, co-creator community, fandom and brand interaction angle as well, and it's allowed for the value creation of let's go with co-creation of digital goods. So the co-creation of a unique avatar and its outfit and the graphics on it and the world that it goes into can all be different contributors to that. So you no longer need and that's also what powers the solopreneur here is you no longer need to have all those skills. right? You can be good at one or two of those things. Ideally, you're really good at distribution. Ideally, you're really good at community building, because that's where the power is at. Um, and then you bring in other people. Let's say in this example where you've built a community and you have amazing uh, digital uh, uh, avatar designers and digital wearable designers is another group, and the graphics that go on those wearables is another group, right? Famous artists and up and comers from the digital art space, and so now they all collaborate to create uh, a avatar, a unit, right? And that one unit can be unique, and be unique from an entire series. Like, let's call it the fall line drop, right? And there can be 100, 1,000 unique pieces in that by all these partners coming together and creating these unique combinations. And the consumer is one of those. The consumer, the fan, is one of the players in this as well. They may have the opportunity to self-assemble what they like out of those different pieces. And so now you have all these parties coming together. They create a unique one-of-one unit of something. And the consumer says, I will pay $20 for that unique unit. I like it a lot. I'm going to take it into, as part of what I'm paying for, I'm going to pay to take it into Roblox. Maybe I pay to take it into Fortnite. Maybe I pay to take it into a Web3 world. And so that's what I paid for. So now you got a world creator that's like an entity, not even showing up as a creator in this space, that they can get it on this share of the $20 that this fan values it out. So with what we've been able to do with blockchain is immediately on purchase of that asset and transitioning ownership of that asset over to the fan, the consumer, who now owns it in full to do what they please with it. All those parties mentioned get their predetermined share of that $20 instantly. And the cost to deliver it to them is a fraction of a penny. No 30 cents plus 3% clearing fee, no 14-day waiting period, right? No, we'll invoice you at the end of the month, or 90-day payment terms instantly. So now I'll land this plane on this part. The design space that opens up for creators of all different skills sizes, collaboration sizes, it's massive compared to what it was. The barrier to spin that up and be like, am I going to get paid on the thing, goes way down. You don't, the other part you're cutting out of here, right, is like 50-page contracts to go, sign up and be like, sure, I'll take this percentage of this collection, this fall collection, for my contribution. And a DocuSign, let's throw a DocuSign account on top of that, right? Like, the costs add up over and over. The overhead to pay a CFO to shuffle these things around, right? The overhead just goes through the roof in traditional value distribution. And smart contracts take it down to the floor to instantly implement for less than a penny, and it can go to basically an infinite number of contributors as well, right? And the work and cost to distribute it to 100 creators is the same as 5. And so now we don't care that there's 100, 1,000 participating creators in the fall drop, the fall lineup, because it didn't cost us anything, right? The marginal cost was nothing. It's awesome.
And it requires no additional people to manage, right? It just works. It's instantly auditable by the millisecond. It's always accurate. I wonder, how much waste and, let's say, lag of innovation is directly due to this notion of a net 30 term on a payment, right? Especially from a startup perspective, access to capital is incredibly important. And so you are the bank if you're a startup, especially if you're in a service industry, because a lot of times you're working on a small deposit or none at all, with expectation of payment at the deliverable. And if you think about like charts and graphs, you look at the growth chart of an organization over time, it looks more like steps, because we're doing quarterly reports. So
Hmm.
Q1 is flat and then up Q2 and then flat and then down Q3 and then flat. And this smooths the curve to a real-time curve, knowing precisely the health of your organization at all points in time without having to do any reconciliation whatsoever. Instant real-time visibility into the health of your financial books. That's interesting, but I think more interesting is real-time access to capital. You're
Yep.
getting paid for the value that somebody was willing to pay for in the moment at the time of transaction of which it's received, including everybody in the value chain that helped make that product or whatever it is. That's interesting because it opens up, I think, an opportunity for these organizations to accelerate because they're not waiting in arrears
Yes.
for the capital they need to continue to sustain their growth. This is a better mousetrap. I will die on that hill all day
They
long.
don't they don't have to. You can now take that capital coming in and make a choice of how to reinvest it tomorrow and next week instead of next month and next quarter. The cycle of innovation, then experimentation, is accelerated dramatically. Like startups are this one of the big superpowers startups have is they are learning machines, and the faster you can learn, the better opportunities you have, right? And the better opportunity you have to take on incumbents, whatever that looks like in whatever the space. And so now if you can shorten your capital cycles to go do that reinvestment from, shorten that by a factor of 30 to 60, right? That's that's a, you have a lot more. The choice is now yours as the operator of what you want to do for your experiments and how fast that you want to go. You really are not limited by capital then at that point. You can turn experiments on a daily basis if your organization can do that. And I say your organization, we are saying your organization. Again, let's back up and go. An organization is 1 to 5 people, right? It is the creator contributing a single graphic to this avatar fall lineup is an organization. They need capital too. We know a lot of those creators that capital is their experiments are, can I take on this project, or do I have to go take on something else that's more safe, less fun, pays less, because I need to make sure that I can eat, pay my bills, right? Like that's part of their experiment on the edge as well. Or just with their time. Like maybe they're doing it on top of a full-time job and they go, hey, listen, I got 2 hours a week. Am I going to invest it in something, this, and I can see the immediate turnaround if it worked or didn't? Or do I, spend 8 hours to get a contract signed with some team to see if, something even manifests or if it gets pulled all together by the corporate entity, right? That like where would you go? You go to the place where you get, less brain damage. You go do the experiment in the, on the edge with the other builders.
Yeah, time to market approaches zero. Never touches zero because there's stuff to do all the time. But like compared to today, if you like normal, let's just say a product, just a widget, right? You have an idea for a widget. Why? Well, because you've been watching the cultural zeitgeist in real time, which is moving incredibly fast, right? There's always a new trend, something new to talk about every 24 hours. News cycles compress and so on. That means there are a plethora of opportunities to create value for the world. However, the expiration date on them are very short, right? You cannot wait 12 months to deploy a product to meet a trend or a need from 12 months ago because it's likely gone at that point, right? So you think about what it takes to build a product. It's your org, it's probably many orgs of partnership along a supply chain, let's call it a value chain, people participating to get this thing to market, from the folks who are designing it internally to those who are sourcing components for it, assembling them, packaging them, shipping them, selling them, servicing them, and so on. How do you organize all of those folks to move fast for a near real time product deployment that you need to go fast on in order to capture an opportunity? You cannot. It would
Yep.
take too long. But
It's
now maybe we can. So that's interesting. I think it accelerates innovation because now we can actually execute in a much faster way by organizing disparate entities together where we can shed probably 80% of the work, which is really apparatus around supporting that network of partnership and the movement of value between those along the supply chain. Um, what if that could all be just programmatic and instantaneous?
Yep.
So, and then
Yeah.
the last thing I'd just throw out there is I kind of view the old world as two-dimensional. It's very flat, like a flat Earth model, right? Think of that hub and spoke we talked about before, but picture it laying on a table flat, right? Yeah, we go from node to node and we jump through hubs and they redirect us over here and blah, blah, blah. But we sort of have to traverse our way back and we're limited to the pipes that were created through the hubs by way of partnership and
Yep.
legal. This new world, though, is very different in the sense of when something needs to change. Let's say any software in the old world, right? You have these major versions. I'm on version 1 of something. I'm on version 1.1.5, right? In theory, all version 1s should work together. It's when you move to version 2 where you start to think about backwards compatibility and how different is version 2 from version 1. It is usually very different, hence the whole new number on the front of it. And in this world, it's a little bit different. We're not talking about deleting and totally replacing applications and programs. What we're talking about is looks more like a three-dimensional space, or from an anecdote, like an onion. So the very small protocols that are being created today live at the center of that onion. They are simple but perfect. There's no need to take that thing and say, I'm going to make it better by making it bigger, right? I'm going to make it bigger, and so it's better. I'm going to add a lot more features to this little thing that was perfect. And I'm going to redeploy it as an alternative to that thing. That's how we have been taught to build software, right? Make it bigger, expand it, expand the feature set based on PMF and customer feedback. But that requires us uh, neglecting or even just totally ejecting the old thing and swiveling to the new thing entirely, making the old thing worthless. In the new world, we wrap the old thing with additional features. So that small little thing in the middle of the onion that did one small thing very well and perfectly now gets wrapped by something else that is bigger, but it's not redundantly copying the functionality of the inner piece. It has wrapped it, has consumed it. It's instantly
Yep.
integratable with it. So we think over time this onion gets bigger, 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 bigger in terms of layers. Therefore, the unique opportunity that we are presented with right now in this moment is this notion of creating picks and shovels on chain that are small and purposeful and perfect, knowing that the world will continue to wrap those bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until we reach the nirvana state of the new cloud on chain. As a developer, it behooves you to take a moment and try to understand this model, because this is the notion of what we like to call internally mailbox money, right? This notion that your protocol lives forever, runs forever, and you're not even touching it anymore. 20 years from now, it's still running, and you have no infrastructure, no servers, no website, nothing. It's just you deployed it, and so it's there as a public good forever. And if you're monetizing it as a protocol, the value flowing through that will continue to be shed towards you forever. And then your children and their children and their children. It's a perpetual cycle. Not saying some of these things won't be replaced, but that's really the prerogative of another developer who thinks they've got it better and has created a network effect of folks who'd rather use that than say something that was wrapped around the battle hardened tested primitive. uh, this is a new model for software development, and it's really nascent, as you can tell. I don't really haven't heard many, if anybody, talking about this, but this is going to be the new standard, and maybe 5 to 10 years out, maybe shorter. Who knows?
So we went from the solo builder org to the solo builders estate there. and yeah, what that looks like over time, what that could possibly look like. Yeah, let's keep pulling at this a bit because and start going back up the tree of building, using the value sharing component of why blockchain and why this diamond facet structure to move forward building software. And so we gave an example of multiple parties coming together to create a good, a digital good in that example, and sharing in that revenue. And then as we think about building software with this tooling and infrastructure, we need lots and lots of builders to build all the things that have yet to be built in the world, right? And so the opportunity you're calling out here, Bob, is that builders can come into that ecosystem and they can build a piece, a component, something that they understand well, something that they have experienced or see an opportunity, a need for, have customers of, and deliver that. And then not only for customers that they bring to that solution, but then the discoverability and reusability by others to then be able to extend that for their customers' needs and not have to rebuild like yet another payments function, yet another like CRM function, like a send an email trigger, right? These are systems that apps, basically all apps have in them a notification management system, right? And instead go use and extend what is there, and now that initial builder that contributed the initial building block can monetize within that chain, right? And there's a reason that second builder came into the space, just like there's a reason additional builders come into current software development space, is because they see another opportunity to offer something more specific. It's kind of the two different paths. Either you're building it bigger, you're building it more specific and more niche. And so now a second builder can come in and get to market faster, reduce their total investment and time and money to get that experiment out there and start generating revenue on that and sharing that with the other builders. And so imagine a world where there are very large applications and suites potentially that are built by hundreds and thousands of contributors that are sharing in that revenue. And it's the same protocol sharing, revenue sharing functionality as we gave with the consumer digital goods experience that's then going to manage and share that revenue generated with all those participants, right? And again, the cost of managing all that overhead and collaborating to do that approaches zero, approaches a penny for creating that transaction and that record and distributing that versus any other apparatus of, let's say, hey, let's get 1,000 developers together and we're going to build a piece of software and we're going to make sure everybody gets paid and coordinate all of that. Well, that's a $100 million startup is what that is, right? That's what the trad model is today. Go raise 10 and then 50 and then 100 plus million and go hire that many people to do exactly that. And the management layer is shares in equity, maybe a rev share, depending on the structure of the company, often not, right? And it's often a bet in the 10-year future that maybe that pays off. And I mean, we're pretty tilted that's it's going to be very, just in general, not only the overhead of that stack that we just laid out, but the tilt to make a bet that something will pay off in 10 or 15 years versus trying to get expected value max now in what you can create and monetize, improve value in, it's going to be a pretty big trade-off for most people. That's it, right? And it's going to be the wrong trade-off for most people. It's been the wrong trade-off for most people over time as well. That's a very documented statistical analysis. And so I'm excited for 1,000 flowers to bloom and let lots of people create. I think a lot of specific versus maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it'll end up being a lot of really great big suites put together, but I think it'll be a lot of really specific things that people really understand the problem.
I think so too, and there's a corollary here. There's a lot of corollaries, but some that come to mind that are sort of modern problem solvers are the game engines like Unreal and Unity, right?
Hmm.
And if you've built anything with those or consume them even as a player, um, you know, the existential question is like, well, why do I need Unity and Unreal to build a game in the age of AI? I could just prompt a game engine into existence. Maybe. Best of luck on that, but the value is community and credibility, and we know that Unity and Unreal are amazing game engines. So
Yep.
their MO is the same one we have here, which is they need developers on platform. And it started out as really just a big rendering engine, right? So like low level, and you would bring that into your game that you were building. But now they're full on development platforms, right? They're game engines with marketplaces. And if you look through those marketplaces, there's everything from huge suites of player management systems all the way down to this little tree that you can
Yep.
put in your game, right? That's the prerogative of the developer saying, do we need more trees? And this other one saying, I've unlocked the perfect player management system. I'm going to release it so others can install it into their game.
Yep.
Our platform, this Props Diamond platform, TBD on name, is a app engine that builds unstoppable applications by way of a marketplace in the same way, where you could install the little tree or the full player management system built by third-party developers, props, our partners, whomever. And so think of them like Lego bricks you snap together and get to market with no code in minutes for pennies, and they run forever with no
Yeah.
maintenance and no infra capex opex. Kind of interesting model there.
Absolutely. And you talk about early adopter builders coming into an ecosystem and building initial pieces that can be used for a very, very long time into the future, and sharing in the monetization of those. I think a couple of really great, pretty obvious examples are the moment in time when the Apple App Store went live, and the tailwinds that it afforded the first builders that were there. I mean, I joined Map My Fitness uh, quite a bit after the initial mobile app launch, so I wasn't there at that moment in time, but it propelled Map My Fitness into the tens of millions of users because it was one of the first 10 apps in the store, and the ability then to strength beget strength of, well, this is the best application to do this. This is the most popular, right? This is the most battle hardened. It works. It does what it's supposed to do really well. It has other network effects around it, right? That that that's a massive opportunity. The same goes for the Shopify app marketplace as well. The entire if you're familiar with Andrew Wilkinson and the TinyCo, uh, you know, collection of companies that came out of that, right? It really started with, they were there day one, and were helping create themes for Shopify, and then kept adding other products and such to it, and we're there to capture a need early. And so there's some really cool inflection points where it's just very small things. You're talking about a GPS tracker, you're talking about a theme for Shopify, and both of those scaled to just massive size and opportunity that then powered a ton of other creative endeavors out of that, right? So it's the small building blocks, when you can participate in the monetization in a perpetuity, and that it only becomes more valuable over time, right? Instead of less, it becomes actually more durable. That's going to be really cool to see people unlock that. Like that's what we're out here building, is we want to build with people. Like, our team isn't going to invent the other 99% of things that don't exist yet in the world, right? We're just trying to help contribute some of it.
No doubt. No doubt. I know we talked about maybe jumping into some wireframes. I know we're coming short on time, or 10 minutes. Maybe we could kick that around next time you and I meet. I think
Yeah.
later this week we're getting back together. I'd love to unpack, like, what will this look like? We've been building the actual on-chain framework that's deployed across a number of networks from our, call it like V.1, along with our SDK to abstract the deployment, the management, the catalog facet management, blah, blah, blah. What we're moving towards now is like, what does this manifest as a marketplace, right? As a true platform. So I'm excited to jump into that with you next stream and do a little wireframing around value and what that could
Yeah,
look like.
for sure. Let's definitely do that. Um, I think maybe to spend a couple minutes here to round out the last uh, category group bucket that I said earlier. We touched on it a bit and kind of wove it together to tie it off of what kind of the why now, why these pieces of technology together, and how does AI play into that. AI is both AI is the why now in a couple different directions. AI is the accelerant, allowing solo builders and small teams to uh, take on very large problem sets, and as well as getting very specific niche solutions out there, right? So we're watching it accelerate. The why now also of this method of facets and a marketplace of these facets, these functions, is really it's counterintuitive, but come along here. While you can prompt uh, while you can prompt AI to write you a piece of code, while you can prompt AI to write you, you give a really good example of an entire game engine. Man, are you really going to trust that OpenAI, GPT or Claude, like just wrote you a flawless, no bugs, no issues running it, like game engine to replace Unity, Unreal Engine, that have 2 decades, almost 3 decades under their belt? Are you kidding me? Like, no way, right? So that's a arguably a big piece of software. You even zoom it down, you say, okay, well, I'm just building a small little thing. But why not build that small little thing off of battle hardened pieces instead of from scratch code? And then the surface area of your differentiator that you're trying to build is now the space that you are innovating in. And so then maybe that's where you're still using AI to and Cursor, for example, to develop and go faster. But your problem space that then you have to work on and make sure that it works as designed is just so much smaller than if you're installing these other facets, these other functions that are battle hardened with tens of thousands of installs and use cases, running through them, right? It what will probably be nominal costs in the grand scheme of getting your application live, especially if the majority of them, if not all, are actually usage based. So now you're talking about no install risk to use the thing that has worked for thousands of people and millions of transactions. Why would you risk starting from scratch, right? So I think that's huge. That is counterintuitive, but I think is really important in what's going to happen and play out in the next couple of years at least. And then the last part around, I'll add, want to hear your feedback, Bob, around AI is that the we AI need we all collectively need cryptography to interact with AI in a couple different modes. AI agents, applications that are effectively what autonomous that are driving functions forward on behalf of us will need to do things. They'll need to be able to interact with applications. They'll need to be able to transact, make payments, make money, transfer, right? And so the cryptography of the blockchain is going to allow them to do that again at that same low cost and instantly integrated way that we were talking about earlier, versus very high cost ways to transfer payments or transfer data. So that's them interacting. And then the other piece is we collectively will need blockchain and cryptography to track the provenance of builders, of creators, of our contributions that we're talking about here, right? So that small function that you talked about, Bob, of a builder coming in and writing that could be used for decades and generate revenue for decades. They need to be able to prove without a shadow of a doubt that that's what they contributed and when they contributed it, and that they're the person that gets paid for it every time it gets used. AI can, the ability to use generative AI to create code, to create works of art, threaten that for builders and creators if we're not able to prove our provenance of, well, this is, we created this, right? And so distribution of value needs to go to that creator. So that's kind of like all the why nows colliding together. Like, we have to. It's, there's kind of not a choice, and it doesn't feel maybe existential to a lot of people's day to day, but it's going to accelerate at such a rate that most people are going to look up and they're going to go like, "Oh, we're here. We're here. How did we get here? Why didn't somebody tell me? Why didn't somebody call this out?" I think is what where a lot of people are at right now, and I mean we're always out on the bleeding edge, and so it's painfully obvious to us. Uh, so that's yeah why I'm so excited about this, because it's like it feels like the definitive problem space that has to go be solved.
It is. I mean, I agree with you 100%. I mean, a world of commoditization of literally everything. Where's your differentiation? Where's your moat? Really, the only moat that calls out to me is network, right? Because we can replicate anything. And to your point around, the provenance of an let's say, on-chain solution. In my vision, how I kind of think about this is, copycats will always exist, right? But in this onion world, the three-dimensional world, they live out on the edge of it, right? They're copying the newest thing that's getting buzz. The interesting part, though, is that the thing they just copied was layered on top of many layers beneath it. And so the developers down in the middle of the onion, it doesn't matter if the outside layer gets copied because they're still using the protocols within the copy, right? So it's more fair. It's ungameable. As it pertains to AI, too, some thoughts. Like, AI is really excellent at reasoning, increasingly so. Even last year, we were building mesh models with AI agents working together in groups, right? So I think expert AI agents in a group setting, much like human beings at a conference, in a breakout session, got 100 people in a room. How do you come to consensus? It's hard, you know. You've
Right.
got like the 2-1-1 model and so on. You got to break down into smaller groups. Those smaller groups at their table achieve consensus, and then there's like some sort of vote up to the top, right? That's consensus. And AI agents are going to need to form consensus. Well, how do they do that, right? They're going to sign with their wallet, voting yes or no on a decision, right? And if a decision can't be made, or if it's some sort of guardrails around the type of decision, maybe gets escalated to a human for that ultimate call, who will also have a wallet and execute that decision on chain so that the rest of the flywheel starts to spin again after the decision is made. AI experts are going to look a lot like microservices on chain, right? All sorts of use cases here, but uh, as a person, maybe I'm an expert in something and I've agentized that expertise online, and you can interact with my agent and basically interact with my brain of the expertise I have that nobody else has. Well, when you do that, you're going to pay the agent
Yep.
on the request, right? Extrapolate that to the new world of microservices, where every organization has potentially billions of agents working together. How do they ask each other to get work done? They're going to pay each other. It's going to be a micro sliver of a unit for that work, right? It's the nirvana, holy grail of costing around compute. Pay for request. Requester pays, right? And so now you've got these billions of AI agents paying each other micro slivers of value for small units of work. Each of these agents has their own wallet. They have their own budget. They have their own objectives, and their goal is to achieve their objective. They cannot use a immutable framework to do that, because the whole point of an autonomous entity is that it's going to get better over time. And so AI agents are going to need to patch and upgrade and evolve their operating system as they learn and their directive and objectives change, just like any organization of people. The Diamond framework is uniquely suited to be the operating system for every conceivable AI agent on the planet. Think about that. The ability for it to exchange value, call outside instantly integratable AI agents that are already on chain for units of work, receive that value for their own work instantaneously so that they can determine success versus failure, make modifications to its directives, and redeploy those funds to continue its pursuit of its goal. The Diamond framework would allow agents to last forever and never stop running, always being able to do the work they need to do until they ultimately fail and maybe run out of money. If there's like a objective like go build me $1 billion business, it could totally fail just like humans do and make some bad decisions or they don't work out. But ultimately the software would run forever and ever and ever. And so these become like these permanent public goods, I think, in my estimation.
And that's another counterintuitive one as well. That because we're not there yet. We don't have a counterfactual to it yet, and a way to envision it. And I think most people from conversations I've had think about AI agents as I'm going to have my AI agent assistant interact with the world, go do things for me on my behalf, right? I'm going to direct that agent, go make money in this way, whatever it is, go solve these problems, go be an analyst, go be a sales rep. Let's use the analyst one as an example. I need you to be a startup studio analyst, and we want to pursue ideas in healthcare space that we can launch with under $10,000 of capital, under $100,000 worth of capital, whatever, right? Here's some constraints. Bring back things for me to review. With the ability to go use OpenAI, Claude, it feels like that agent would then go into that knowledge base, would then use that ability to go write whatever other software it needs or data gathering to then keep doing its tasks. In reality, its compute cheapest way to get there with highest probability of giving me the response that I need is to go find an expert agent. It's to go find an expert agent in healthcare, in small biz healthcare specifically. And on the other side of that expert agent, let's say they are sitting on a data set, a treasure trove of aggregated data around nursing homes in the Midwest, like super specific. They spent time putting that information together. Some team did, cleaning it, cleansing it, putting some analysis out of it. They've created a 100-page report that's the definitive report on this topic. Like, why would my analyst AI agent spin up a whole process to try to figure out how to do all that and gather all that data and go pay those individual sources to get that data when it's just going to go to the expert and say, like, I have a question, and that expert can answer it, and they say, I have a 100-page report that has all of your questions answered in it, and it is $1,000. And that agent goes, that's cheaper than it's going to cost me to do all the compute over the next week to get these answers. I will buy that, and I'll take that back to my requester. And it's just going to be that over and over and over again, except like even smaller, like super small things like you're talking about, that it's cheaper for it to go find an expert and get a question answered that cost it a few pennies than to spin up an entire process and try to, it can do it. It's the difference. We're going to cross over to the threshold of what you and I have done in our entire careers and our team of the software development trade-offs, the product development trade-offs, where it's like, we can do anything. Is the trade-off worth the cost, right? Is the outcome worth the cost? What are the alternatives? And now when you put that into everyone's hands, that they're effectively going to be making those trade-offs, which historically in a business have only been made by a few people at the end of the day, right? Like true trade-off decisions or deploying capital. Everyone, I'll rephrase like that. Everyone will be an individual capital allocator, a capital deployer, right? And that we've never had a power distributed like that in history that pointed at commerce. And so that's going to be the pulling all these counterintuitive pieces together, and we're going to see what happens, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about layers there too. It's layers all the way down. It's turtles all the way down, right? Like your agent's calling the expert agent. Well, there's probably lots of agents like yours also calling that expert agent. So they're
Sure.
fundamentally on a layer below that outside layer. It persists. I there is no AI agent powered world without blockchain beneath it. Here's an example to the point around like AI agents, of course, wanting to update as it goes, right? To change its capabilities to do the thing it thinks it needs to do next, right? Is that going to run on an EC2 box in AWS? Well, no, because like now you've got this whole other massive software solution that you had to build so that your agent can write code, CI/CD it into a code base and redeploy itself and wait for that deployment to finish and so on. So like highly centralized, like, and then your organization closes up shop and it's dead forever, just gone. And really, what we're talking about is this AI agent could either write its own facets to fill a gap it thinks it needs, or go to a marketplace with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of feature capability facets and just install them. Well, how does it do that? A single transaction on chain, right?
Yep.
And they're already connected to the chain. They already have funds in their wallet. They can sign their own transactions and deploy them to the network. It's incredibly resilient, and the activities of one agent likely, depending on how you set this up, would not affect another agent. So if you did have an agent make a really bad decision and update itself into some really weird configuration that borked it, you know, RIP, pour one out for it. But the rest of them in the cluster, pod or swarm or whatever you want to call it, can continue to do their thing and evolve over time. These become, sentient, which is scary. Maybe we shouldn't do this. But somebody's going to.
What that's the real question is what do you call a flock of AI agents?
This could,
I'd prefer not to call it a swarm. A swarm does sound intimidating. Maybe we can come up with something that sounds more approachable. But yeah,
well, I feel like there's a dad joke punchline at the end there for sure. We just got to find it.
I don't have it yet. I don't have it. We'll workshop that one for next time.
Right on.
Um, we've covered a ton of ground here. This has been awesome. Anything else before we wrap? Any other final thoughts?
No, enjoyed it for sure. I'm looking forward to continuing it. I think that's what we're going to do on our little side series here is continue to explore. And so next time, maybe we can dive into some wireframing if we haven't already got there before the next stream anyhow, but we'll unpack it more.
Yeah, for sure. This has been Pixels and Protocols, and we'll do that next time, diving into even more wireframing of this concept. That's been Bob. I'm Kevin. At Props on Twitter, Props Labs on LinkedIn. Hit us up and see you next time.
See you, Kevin.
Bye.